Another summer rolls around, and it's time for the Final Fantasy V 4-job Fiesta again. Last year went really smoothly. Getting Black Mage and Chemist was essentially a freebie. To recap, the 4-job Fiesta is an event that runs every summer to raise money for the Child's Play charity. Instead of getting to use all of the jobs available in Final Fantasy V, you're assigned 4 randomly via a Twitter bot corresponding to each crystal. 1 job for wind, 1 job for water, 1 job for fire, and 1 final job for the earth crystal. You must have at least one of these jobs in your party at all times once they're unlocked. There are a few additional parameters you can give yourself, like each character only using 1 job, or only using classic Final Fantasy 1 jobs. On to the start of the game. Standard progression through the Wind Shrine. Just fight the battles as they come and reach the top of the tower. Then just waste Wing Raptor with physicals and don't attack him when he's shielding himself. Pretty much a free win by design. A Shattered Crystal means we get our first job, the Wind Crystal job. This year it's Black Mage. Black Mage was the same as 2018's Fiesta. It's a mostly free win. I kind of wish I got something different to showcase like White Mage or Blue Mage, even Knight, but it sure as HE double hockey stick beats a monk. Of course, I did skip out on all the optional content last year because I just had enough to beat the end boss with my job setups. This year might be a little different. We'll see how it goes. The early stages of the game are pretty much identical to last year. Buy all the spells and some items to get us through the ship graveyard. Change everyone's job to Black Mage, and obviously, move everyone to the back row. Physical attacks are just not in the equation. Just punish the encounters on the ship with really any magic. Fire, ice, and bolt all work great. Then, lay waste to the first boss with bolt attacks like we're Zeus, calling lightning bolts from the heavens. Continue onwards, and punish the encounters in the graveyard with fire. Everything here's undead. Wait, Ferris is a girl? What? The rest of the trip is pretty uneventful, and eventually it leads down to the boss of the area. My party just can't kill Siren when she's in human form. She takes no magic damage, and her physicals are just terrible. Once she swaps to undead, it's a completely different ballgame. Everyone casts fire, and she goes down easily. Unfortunately, by bad luck, Ferris got focused down, but that's okay. Sometimes that just be how it do. Next up is to head down to Carwin and get ourselves the free Ice Rod. And it does definitely help when climbing the North Mountain. It adds just a little bit of oomph to your ice spells in an area that really has no elemental weaknesses. Otherwise, it's just a matter of resting and stocking up before heading out. At the top of the mountain, Magisa, while not having a weakness, isn't a big deal at all. I actually killed her without her ever summoning her husband. A couple of spells into a busted ice rod, and she's down for the count. No extra enemies, just an easy win. Lena walks through the poison flowers instead of going around them, and we get our Windrake. With our Drake, we can actually head south now to Warris. Nothing much here except the ability to restock on items, and some exposition from the king. The Warris Tower is up next. I managed to get a fire rod to drop here, which was pretty lucky. It's a 1 in 16 chance just on the way up. No extra grinding required, and I was fully prepared to. At the top of the tower, Garula is one of the tougher boss fights for a pure Black Mage party, almost entirely because of Garula's hard-hitting physical attacks. It was a little bit of wearing Garula down with fire spells before finishing him off with a broken fire rod, courtesy of Lady Luck. Garula only has about 1200 HP, so a single rod is almost enough to kill it. I just did a few fire spells to be safe, and then when he started double countering, I finished him off with the broken fire rod. The loss of the fire rod isn't really a big deal. We're going to be swimming in rods shortly. But more importantly, after Garula, the water crystal breaks. A broken crystal means a new job. This time, it's Mystic Knight. Mystic Knight is a pretty interesting job. It's one of my favorites, actually. You effectively buff your sword with a magic spell, and then deal high physical and elemental damage with a very high hit rate when you physically attack. It's really strong because it has a much higher hit rate than standard black magic for high level enemies. It can hit enemies that are susceptible to instant death or petrify but have very high magic evasion, which could take dozens of turns to land with traditional magic. Also, using the appropriate elemental attack on enemies weak to that element, you have a chance at an instant death, and that's pretty darn good. It's also a fairly robust physical job, and it will let us use heavier armor and shields, which does diversify our gear options. A stronger front line does complement our weaker back line, so that's pretty nice. There is a little bit of synergy here with Black Mage, since we're already committed to buying Black Magic. I'll be able to use those spells with both Black Mage and with Spell Sword. A few of those spells for Mystic Knight aren't usable by Black Mage, so we may have to hunt those down as well. Mystic Knight's Spell Barrier isn't the best passive ability, but you know, it's an ability to give to our Black Mages for the immediate future. Now unfortunately, since we didn't roll White Mage, Blue Mage, or Red Mage, magical healing is completely out of the picture. Potions in Final Fantasy V are pretty terrible, especially in World 1 and early World 2. The game correctly assumes you'll have access to basic cure spells from the Wind Shrine onwards, and clearly encourages you to have at least one White Mage, or someone capable of healing throughout the entirety of the game. With the self-imposed challenge of the 4-job Fiesta, I can't use White or Red Mages. There will be some ways to circumvent this later, but for now, we're going to have to rely on potions and beating encounters via massive burst damage from Black Magic. This is actually a pretty common thing in 4-job Fiestas. But back to our little adventure. Up to the meteor, and teleport to the next continent, since our Drake can't actually fly over mountains. It's a linear trip to Karnak. Just head inside the town and attempt to buy the super cheap weapons in the shop. And we're thrown in jail. Really hospitable people in here. Just wanted some rods, man. Just wanted some rods. After that scene, we're out and tasked with securing the fire crystal in the fire ship. First things first, though, it's time for a bit of grinding. East of Karnak in the forest, there's a consistent 5 wild knack encounter. This encounter is super easy, being able to be taken down with 1 casting of Fire 2, which we can buy in Karnak. The goal here is to grind for the following items. The entire Tier 2 Black Magic library that becomes available in Karnak, about 10 to 15 of Fire, Ice, and Thunder rods, and update our equipment for both our Mystic Knights and our Black Mages. I grinded for a good chunk of time here, so fighting battles in the fire ship is basically worthless. Same goes for chests, there's really nothing in here for us. I can't use the interesting equipment like the Thief Glove, and the Green Beret just really isn't worth going out of the way for. Just head down to the boss as quickly as possible, running from any battles. That's going to make the chicken knife a little bit stronger later on. At the bottom, after the switch puzzle, equip the Black Mages with ice rods. Once we start Liquid Flame, we're going to open up with a busted ice rod for mega damage, and then Liquid Flame changes forms. There's a few states here, and one of them, the Hand, has extremely high magic evasion. Unfortunately, I forgot this little tidbit, and just wasted another ice rod, and some turns before realizing I just had to punch it to get it to swap forms again. Once it did swap, another ice spell was enough to take it down. Immediately after Liquid Flame, we have to do the Escape from Karnak event. With 2 Mystic Knights and 2 Black Mages, getting through this event is trivial. We have insane damage output and more than enough survivability. I don't bother opening everything this playthrough. I just rush to either side of the castle for the Elf Cape and the Guardian Knife, the only 2 things I really care about. I did open a few random chests for Gil and Elixirs, but I mostly just hoofed it out of the castle and got out of there as fast as possible. I cheesed the Ironclaw fight because honestly, I don't need to get Deathclaw since I have no Blue Mage. Figured I'd just waste him with magic before he transformed, which makes the fight a bit easier. It's kind of a nice little Easter egg thing too. Once we're clear of Karnak, we get some time to breathe. And another broken crystal means another job for our arsenal. This time, it's Hunter. Hunter's actually not that bad of a job. Bows are kind of okay weapons and deal full damage from the back row, so that's kind of nice. They're very strong against most flying enemies as they have a high hit rate. It's kind of lackluster when compared to other jobs in the Fire Crystal, such as Ninja or Summoner. The absolute best part of Hunter is you can learn X-Fight. X-Fight allows a character to attack 4 times in a single turn. The targets are random, which does kind of suck, but if there's only 1 enemy, that's 4 times damage output. This obviously has insane synergy with Mystic Knight's ability to self-buff with spells, and then you can use X-Fight to unleash insane damage to your opponents. That's going to be our go-to strategy for our Mystic Knight. Hunters can equip daggers, and you can use daggers with Spellblade. We can turn our Hunter into a de facto Mystic Knight like this, or give him sub-black for pure spellcasting. I'll be playing it by ear. Bows are kind of nice and you don't get a ton of opportunity to use them as they're usually outperformed by other weapon classes. Just having a fully fledged hunter with X-Fight and a bow in the back row is also nothing to sneeze at. It's probably pretty good. That is kind of the fun of the 4-job Fiesta after all. So we have to change one of our party members to a hunter when we get access to it. Despite the fire crystal breaking, we don't actually get access to all of our fire crystal jobs just yet. So for now, the party remains the same. I'm enjoying 2 Mystic Knights and 2 Black Mages. It's a nice balance of physical and magical. Of course, our Mystic Knights are also fully fledged Black Mages too, so you know, potatoes, tomatoes. Head west and then south through the desert to the ancient library. We can either run from every battle, or bulldozer through all of the battles with fire magic. Fights here are long, so I'm opting to run. Once we get about midway through, we have to face off against Ifrit. A couple of castings of ice too, followed by a broken ice rod, and he's down for the count. Easy game, easy life. Then it's just through the rest of the library until we reach the final level. The group is accosted by more literature with ill intent, and we have to face off against Byblos. Byblos is a book, and he's insanely weak to fire. A broken fire rod takes him out, and he's just toast. Burned to a crisp. Completely destroyed. Erased from existence. We get a little bit of dialogue and exposition here from Sid and Mid. Then they fix up the fire ship for us. Fantastic! A new ship that works without wind. Let's go to the Crescent Isles and sink it immediately. After the ship sinks, there's only 2 places to go. The town and the forest. The forest has the black chocobo, which can't fly because it ate our crystal shards. A quick whack by Butts, and we've got Hunter and Bard. Now it's time to adjust our party. 1 hunter in the group from here on out. Just a quick trip back to the ancient library, and Sid and Mid tell us to go to the ruins through the desert. The sandworm is only really hard if you're rocking Berserker only. Otherwise, it's a pushover. Spamming ice magic until it croaks. Just make sure not to attack the holes and you'll get through just fine. Another victory, and more progress. All we gotta do is cross the desert and enter the town. Just gotta play hide and seek with King Tycoon and then we fall into the ruins. Afterwards, we get our fire ship back, but we found a new airship. Sid and Mid fix it up, and then we get to ascend to the skies, where we have to fight a crab boss for some reason. Crayclaw is a complete joke. An absolute pushover. A single broken thunder rod destroys it. If it doesn't, for whatever reason, just follow up with a bolt 2 or some light physicals to erase it from existence. Now the skies are ours, and that opens up the world. But we're just going to head back to the ruins to activate them, then return to Sid and Mid. Now this was totally optional, but I decided to do it anyways. Without the ability to use curative magic, a lot of fights are going to be kinda dicey. The town of Istory, known mostly for its waterfall, has flame, coral, and angel rings available for 50,000 gil a pop. Flame rings are what we're looking for. They absorb fire damage, make you immune to ice damage, but make you vulnerable to water damage. With black magic, and our party equipped with flame rings, we can cast fire spells on our team to act as a substitute cure spell. The major downsides are that this is only usable in combat, makes us vulnerable to water damage, and it locks down our accessory slot. Going to Istory is convenient because we can also pick up the Toad spell here. It'll get at least 1 use. I did some experimentation of guild grinding locations with our party setup. I tried the mini dragons outside of Istory, but they take way too long to kill, and you usually need to toad them all first, which can miss. It's a mess. I tried north of Crescent Island on the Flame Island, but again, it just took too long to kill things. It's a great spot if you're looking for EXP and AP, but I'm almost entirely after Gil. The main way to grind here is use a ninja, and you throw lightning scrolls to one-shot the entire group of black flames, but you only get about a net 100 gil or so a fight because the lightning scrolls are kinda pricey. So, I went back to Karnak and farmed wild knacks. 1 all cast of Fire 1 with a fire rod cleared them out, and at 625 gil a pop, it only took, 320 random battles? That's a lot of inefficient grinding, but levels aren't overly important right now. AP, also not a huge deal, mainly because we'll likely master every one of our 4 jobs by the end of the game. With our 200,000 gil in hand, we make a victory trip back to Istory, and our wallet is now empty. But we have 4 accessories that we're probably never going to take off. Flame rings for days. Fully clad in our name brand rings, it's time to head back to the Tycoon Meteor to fight Adamantoise. Adamantoise is a joke. I didn't even bother breaking an ice rod here. I just unloaded ice 2s and it went down without issue despite having innate shell. Not breaking a rod, that's 750 gil saved, and after dropping 200,000, that's just economical. Now our return to Sid and Mid, and we get an upgrade to our airship. The ability to fly even higher into the sky to reach the floating Ronka ruins. There's a string of battles up here to destroy cannons. Flame cannons are 100% free since they only use a mission, a fire attack, and with our flame rings, we now absorb fire damage. The missile variety is a lot scarier as they deal gravity damage and inflict confusion. Of course, both types are still mechanical and therefore insanely weak to lightning damage. A few broken thunder rods later, and all 4 sets of cannons are gone, absorbed into time. The soul cannon makes its appearance afterwards. Another mechanical cannon for us to take down. Non-black mages use thunder too. Black mages use thunder too. Actually, you know what? Mystic Blade's Spellblade with the Guardian Knife did pretty good damage. I was happy about that. The Ronka ruins have some good goodies for us. Gold armor and a gold shield for a Mystic Knight. I managed to get a dark bow for my hunter from a drop. That was kind of neat. Then an ancient sword, again, for our Mystic Knight. Once we've got the equipment, I just head down to the bottom. Talk to kooky King Tycoon and start the nightmare of many a playthrough. Archaeoavis, our old nemesis. Fun fact, the first time I played Final Fantasy V, I couldn't beat this guy. Granted, I was what, 14 or something? I was a young lad. Archaeoavis is defined by having high physical defense and rotating magical resistance. Our party setup for this is 2 Mystic Knight, 1 with an ancient sword, and 1 with a guardian knife. 1 hunter with a dark bow, and a black mage. Everyone has flame rings, and with Archaeoavis' rotating magic resistance, the black mage is basically gonna act as our healer. Low, consistent damage wins out against unreliable burst damage, at least for this fight. Physical attacks and the occasional heal from the black mage by casting Fire 2 on our party. This was actually one of the easiest Archaeoavis fights I've ever had in a Fiesta. I quite literally put auto fire on my controller and just set it down. Lena as our black mage had animals, which is what I put on memory. Animals isn't great, but it gave me an occasional physical damage attack with Bee Swarm, and an occasional heal with Nightingale. Of course, if I needed to actually heal, I just took over and used Fire 2 on my party. I love this Super Hoary Commander, man. It's my favorite controller for the Super Nintendo. The second form is weak to physicals and largely immune to magic damage. Since we wasted the first forms with physicals, this goes down pretty easy by comparison. The final crystal shatters. Another broken crystal means another job. And this time, it's our old nemesis. Dancer. I can't stand using dancers. I actually hate them. The single worst 4-job Fiesta I ever did was Monk, Red Mage, Ranger, and Dancer. I got to Neo X Death after much struggles, but I didn't bother beating him and I hated every second of my attempts. You'd think monks with X-Fight would be good. You'd be right. For World 1 and 2. World 3? You would be dead wrong. Unlike Final Fantasy 1 where monks start bad and end up insane, in Final Fantasy 5, it's the exact opposite. In an RPG, I value reliability, as demonstrated by our previously used strategy against Archaeoavis. Dancer as a job is just flat out unreliable. The dance command has 4 outcomes. Tempting Tango, which confuses a target, which can be okay. Jitterbug Duet, which acts as an HP drain, which is usually better than physical attacking, unless your target is undead. Mystery Waltz, which drains MP from the target, which again can be okay. Finally, and most notably, is Sword Dance. When this comes up, your character will attack for 4 times the damage as normal. Sword Dance is insanely strong, but it only comes up a quarter of the time. You can buff it up with the endgame Dancer gear to 50% of the time, but you'll still whiff over half of your attempts at it. Since we also have Hunter and the potential for X-Fight, which is a consistent 4 attacks per turn, even though the targets are randomized, Sword Dance is just completely outclassed here. There will be very little need to use Dance except on the Dancer, and even then, Slapping X-Fight on it will probably give better and more consistent results. Not even getting into the fact that we have black magic. The one potentially interesting synergy is with equip ribbons. This lets any job equip ribbons as well as any of the dancer-specific equipment such as red shoes and prism dresses. Ribbons give a lot of status immunity as well as stat buffs. They're easily the best gear in the game and only usable by dancers, freelancers, or if you're using equip ribbon. Since our black mage doesn't really have any other synergy with our jobs, we can at least give them equip ribbon and use the dancer gear for status immunities. It's kind of good. Speaking of ribbons, I am really kicking myself for not picking it up during the escape from Karnak. I just totally forgot that there was one in there, and I guess I assumed I wouldn't get dancer this time around. Why would I assume that when I've gotten dancer for 50% of my fiestas? Great question. I swear that Gilgabot knows that I hate it and gives it to me every time. Next time I do this, I'm going to make my own randomizer with blackjack and hookers. Dancers do also get the flirt command, which acts as a charm. You can use this if you have a blue mage, for instance, to get things like White Wind casted on your party without a Beastmaster's control. We don't have anything that would directly benefit from charms, so flirt will only get limited use, if any at all. Back to our adventure, Galoof leaves the party after the Archaeoavis fight. Fortunately, I used my huge brain to remember what happened last year. I took off Galoof's ancient sword and gave him a mithril sword. That way I don't temporarily lose my ancient sword or guardian knife. The final bits of World 1 are pretty uneventful. Just go meet up with Sid and Mid at the Meteors. It's a pretty basic boss gauntlet that's extremely easy compared to Archaeoavis. Bomb Squad? Just spam any tier 2 magic on all cast, or break a rod. Easy victory. If you don't have any target all spells or abilities, well, that's just gonna be tough going. And believe me, I've been there. As long as you kill all the bombs at the same time, you don't have to deal with the erase cast, and they just stay dead. All bombs in Final Fantasy V are not fire elemental, and you can damage them with fire. Next meteor, next boss. Titan can be difficult. I'm not worried at all though. Basic attacks and breaking a rod takes him down. The only thing to be worried about is his final attack, but I had enough HP to tank through it. Next meteor, next boss. I was a little afraid of Chimera Brain since I am wearing flame rings which are vulnerable to water damage. Aqua Rake barely scratched my guys, and it was just a matter of some Mystic Knight and Ranger attacks followed by a broken fire rod. Apparently Aqua Rake doesn't count as a water spell or something. That's news to me. Maybe the desert enemies are just specifically weak to Aqua Rake. Learn something new every year, I guess. That's all the mandatory story objectives in World 1. There's just a few things to do here if you choose. I went back to Warris Castle and got myself the second elf cape from the basement, which we may actually never use. The enemies in here are effectively impossible for us to kill. They have insanely high physical defense and evasion, and they absorb all elements. All I did was tank hits and heal my party with fire too as I attempted to run from every battle. I got the cape, and I got the heck out of there. That's all I really cared to do. I'm not interested in grinding more for angel rings or coral rings. I didn't get chemists, so I don't need to grind dark matters from prototypes. I didn't get summoner, so I don't need to hunt down Shiva. No blue mage means no reason to try and get any blue magic. I'm not really interested in pillaging Jakol or anything else like that. There's just not a whole lot for us at this point. It's time to move on. So it's off to the Meteor Convergence to get to Galoof's world. World 2 starts linear. You end up on an island and have to use a tent. The enemies here only drop tents, so you can go ahead and farm them if you want. I just used one and moved on. Beating the abductor or not doesn't really matter. I managed to do it, so good for me, I guess. We do a jailbreak here with Galoof to get our party out of Exdeath's castle. Unfortunately, that means we actually have 4 party members again. And that means we need to use a dancer. I chose Lena because she looks the best as a dancer. Obviously. Escaping Exdeath's castle is easy, and it's just a matter of heading to the big bridge after. Not a lot of note here. Just run through the big bridge and fight Gilgamesh. Spamming attacks and healing our party with fire too. Pretty standard stuff. I tried out dance, and I remember why I hate it. I'm not going to use it for the rest of this playthrough. Lena can just chunk people with the guardian knife, or use magic as our healer. After the bridge, we're thrown across the world. It's a matter of working our way to Ruger, And there's a lot of stuff for us here. Lots of new upgrades to weapons and armor, and even spells. Since I'm broke from not fighting battles and blowing 200,000 gil on flame rings, I had to grind a bit here. I grinded about 15,000 gil and bought all the new black magic spells and new gear. Full gold set for our Mystic Knight, full magic setup for Dancer and Black Mage, full agility set for Hunter. Grab the new black magic spells too before heading back down. Break and Bio are insanely good spells, and we will be attempting to use them against several boss encounters. Drain isn't bad, and it can be used with Spellblade for some sustain for our Mystic Knight. Just a matter of following the path in this world until we reach the forest. A Moogle will get spooked and fall into the hole. We should follow that guy. This is linear and just a matter of fighting our way through the path. The boss of this area is a zombie T-Rex, and that's easily beaten by fire attacks, or throwing an elixir, or Phoenix down if you can connect it, or breaking fire rods. Breaking rods. The trek through the desert isn't nearly as perilous as it would seem. I just crossed it haphazardly and killed the only encounter I got. Then a fun little event in the Moogle Forest, including a bunch of gil, and I get a third elf cape. Then we're carted off to Galoof's castle. What? Galoof's a king? What? Castle Val has one of the best AP farming locations in the game with statues. The best way to farm them is with Blue Mage's level 5 Doom. We don't have it. The alternative is to throw softs at them, or to use bolt magic. Groups of 2 aren't particularly scary, besides the occasional petrify. Groups of 5 are significantly more dangerous. Ferris was about halfway to X-Fight, only requiring about 250 AP. I opted to go ahead and grind here, since that sets up Ferris for pretty much the rest of the game as our dedicated Mystic Knight. Bolt 2 farming wasn't particularly effective. Throwing softs was less tedious overall, but did actually require paying attention versus sliding up that sweet auto-fire switch. It didn't take that long, but about 70 softs later, and Ferris has X-Fight. Spellblade X-Fight is an extremely potent combo, but does require a turn of setup. It won't be used for every battle, but it will be insane on some boss fights. Ferris is promptly turned into a Mystic Knight with X-Fight, likely for the rest of the game. But it's time to move on, we've spent enough time here. Let's get the heck out of Val and head to Kelb. Kelb has new gear. Most notably is the Venom Rod for our Black Mage for the bio-weak enemies we'll encounter. Then some upgrades to our Hunter's gear, including a bow that can instantly kill, which is pretty sweet. Once we're done, we head off to the Valley of Dragons, which is actually on a mountain. Apparently no one has ever come back from here. The bone mail is available here, and it's actually insane for our party setup. We do not have traditional healing, so the pseudo-undead effect on the bone mail doesn't really matter. The take double damage from fire stipulation doesn't matter. We absorb fire with the flame ring. The only real drawback is that you have no way to revive a fallen character using bone mail in battle. Phoenix downs don't work. There's no other way to revive them. It's a huge defense, magic defense boost with tons of status immunity. Great gear when utilized correctly. At the top of the mountain, the Dragon Pod is susceptible to instant death. With the bow we got from Kelb, we can actually kill it in a single hit if we get lucky. Guess what? I wasn't. It's just a matter of dealing as much damage as we can while managing the little buds. Bone Mail was the MVP here. Ferris was immune to all the status effects the mini-pods use, which just meant spamming X-Fight and praying we eventually hit the Dragon Pod. Really wishing I didn't miss the Ribbon and Karnak here because our Dancer could have been immune too, speeding up the fight at least a little bit. The Dragon Pod's magic defense is too high to penetrate with tier 2 magic, so I broke a bunch of fire rods to speed out the process. We won't need fire rods much longer, so any surplus we may as well get some value out of now. All of this was just waiting for the battle to be over with lucky X-Fight targets. Not by any means difficult. Once we're victorious, it's just a matter of marching back to Castle Val and getting our Drake again. Off to Sage Guido's cave, then to Castle Surgate to put away some library books. Playboy.
Sounds like a bongo mag.
A what?
A jazz mag. A porno.
Once we're done with that little diversion, it's off to Zez's fleet and the Barrier Tower. My experience last year grinding wall rings in the Barrier Tower was so bad that I opted not to bother. I pray that they don't release Season 2 of Cooking on High. Don't curse the world with that. I just climbed to the top and got my loot from the monster boxes. The gold hairpin is nice as it will reduce the Black Mage's MP consumption. Also, we got the Blood Sword, which isn't super great because I can just use Spell Sword Drain with X-Fight. Unfortunately, the shocking realization sets in that Mystic Knights can't use Night Sword class weapons. And that really, really hurts. At the top, Atmos is a sleepy boy, and he needs to be put to bed. Spellblade Sleep has a massively high hit rate, so that's the easy way to do it. Then once the Maw of the Void is taking a nap, spamming Bio 3 with everyone is the go-to. Atmos will just stay asleep and take massive damage from Bio. Doesn't put up any fight at all. Nothing really of note now, just head to Guido's cave with the sub, do the dungeon, then head west to Moore. Moore has some great stuff. It has tier 3 magic and equipment upgrades. There's also a second Guardian knife hidden in the barrels near the pub. Tier 3 magic is insanely powerful and will be utilized heavily for both damage and healing via Fire 3, well, for the rest of the game. The Forest of Moore is usually nothing of note either, that is until we reach the end. For once in my life, I got the Aegis Shield. And a job that can actually use it this time. A quick leave for the forest to save, and then we go back in. The crystals are probably the biggest wall for a lot of party setups. They each correspond to an element, and when they get into critical HP, they will start spamming strong magic on your entire party. I made a very critical error here, and had the bone mail on Ferris, when this fight has no status effects I need to look out for. She died, after blocking a healing spell with the Aegis Shield. So that's pretty fun. She was my only hard-hitting physical attacker. Legitimately might have been better to just take the Flame Shield, to free up an accessory slot for Ferris. Oh well, live and learn. Hindsight's 2020 after all. The fight is just spamming Fire 3 on individual crystals, and my own party for healing. Working the crystals down, slowly, one at a time. I don't know what it is about this fight, but the top crystal, the Fire Crystal, seems immune to pretty much all magic. I had to resort to physically attacking with all of my characters, including my Black Mage, who I re-equipped with a Guardian Knife. Once it gets into critical, it starts spamming Fire 3, which my party absorbs. I guess the next level strategy would have been to put the Fire Crystal into critical HP first, and then use it as free healing for the rest of the battle because of my Flame Rings. Why didn't I do that during the fight? Am I a brainlet? These crystals can be hit with instant death, and I was attacking every turn with a killer bow, which apparently has an 18% chance of proccing an instant death effect. I can safely say that the killer bow is garbage, because I have never one-hit killed anything with it, and I've used it since Kelb. Trash weapon. Don't recommend. Regardless, X-Death kills Galoof, just like Snape kills Dumbledore, and Darth Vader is Luke's father. After waiting around for a bit, the ghost of Galoof's past comes and breaks Kara out of her rut. Then Kara replaces Galoof and gets all his abilities and equipment. Did she just absorb his soul? Now it's time to move onwards. With
such a lust for revenge.
It's time for X-Death's castle, baby. This is probably the best dungeon in the entire game, mainly because it actually forces you to use your party to the best of your ability. There's good gear for almost every job here, and you'll even get some use out of Geomancer, and that's a rarity. There's an ice shield for our Mystic Knight, which is actually a nice complement to our Flame Ring, but doesn't block as much as the Aegis shield. Granted, it won't also block our spells, which is kind of good. There's also a hidden Gale Bow in here, which has a 25% chance to use X-Fight. Since our current hunter doesn't have X-Fight, it's a good option for now. It's also significantly stronger than the Killer Bow. It's still not as good as our hunter using spells like Fire 3. Man, black magic is so overpowered. It's kind of gross. Lots of the other goodies in here we just can't really use. Lots of knight swords, some samurai swords. Unfortunately, we just can't use any of it, so there's no point in even bothering picking it up. Another battle with Gilgamesh here. Nothing of note besides the fact he inflicts a lot of status, so that ribbon I forgot in Karnak would have been pretty useful. Oh well. Bone Mail helped here, as does rolling a Black Mage at the Wind Crystal, who knew? Spamming Fire 3 on every character. Damaged? Use Fire 3 on the party. No items. Fire 3 only. Final destination. Beating Gilgamesh actually makes a fight in the end zone have a little bit of a special event, so that's kind of fun. The Excalibur is not the Excalibur, it's the Excalibur, and it always does 1 damage. It has some uses, like with Goblin Punch, but for our setup, it's totally useless. All it's going to do is simply annoy us for the rest of the game by being auto-equipped every time we change jobs. Onwards to X-Death himself. He's a pretty scary fight. He'll almost always start with Condemn, but he didn't this time. Fire 3 is our go-to, on everyone. Seriously, sitting in the back row, spamming Fire 3 is stupidly broken in Final Fantasy V. Let me give you some perspective on this. X-Fight with Drain Sword and an Air Lance on a Mystic Knight is doing about 1350 damage. A Fire 3 from a Hunter is doing around 1500. Magic is just brokenly overpowered, and it's kinda disappointing. I guess Mystic Knights have pretty weak physicals, or at least a lot weaker than I thought. It's likely because I'm usually using Knight Swords at this point, so daggers and regular swords are kind of lagging behind. Otherwise, it's the standard strategy. Unga Bunga, fire 3 on enemy. Unga Bunga, fire 3 on party. Fire 3, fire 3, fire 3. After the battle, you're back in Butts' world. Or are you? The start of the merged world is pretty basic and linear. It's just a matter of getting our party back together, starting with just Butts and Kara, and then getting Ferris back and heading down to the Pyramid of More. Instead of that, let's head past the pyramid 2 more and grab ourselves a chicken knife. I've been regularly running through battles in most of the dungeons and instead opting to grind in specific spots. And I haven't done a lot of grinding since Karnak. It has the exact same power as an air lance here, but also gives +5 agility, which boosts its damage output. It's good. I'll use it. And it will continue to get powered up through the rest of the game. X-Fight also ignores the chicken knife's flee effect, so it's way more consistent. Now just double back to the Pyramid of More to fight us some mummies. He's got the mummies. The Gargoyle Guardians gotta be killed at the same time. Easy with all cast Fire 3 a couple times. It's just over. Are you shocked by this insane strategy? Not a ton of stuff in here, except a white robe, which is kind of a nice upgrade for a black mage, which is then promptly upgraded again to the superior black robe. The dancer can use the white robe, so that's a nice concession, I guess. There's also a ribbon in here, which is insanely useful. You bet your bottom dollar I didn't forget this one. It's one of the only good things about getting a dancer. There's tons of other treasure in the pyramid, but I skipped most of it, because I just don't need it, and even if I did, couldn't use it. Once that ribbon's in my inventory, it's promptly equipped, then it's just a matter of getting to the top of the pyramid and getting the first tablet, which unleashes Bahamut to terrorize the rest of the world. Then we just mosey on back towards the ancient library. But you didn't think you'd finish the Pyramid of More without a boss fight, did you? Melusion can be tricky because of her barrier change. It's kind of a running theme. Most of the hard bosses in Final Fantasy V have barrier change. Interesting. However, she always starts off in the form that's weak to fire. Unloading Fire 3s into her at the start of the fight makes short work of that pitiful 20,000 HP pool. This is the first battle where I've gotten to really utilize Spell Sword and X-Fight, casting Fire 3 on Ferris, and then unloading with a chicken knife X-Fight kills Melusion, granted after 2 Fire 3s from my Black Mage and my Hunter. No chance of barrier change makes this fight a ton easier. Barrier changing completely changes this fight, trust me. It ain't fun. Time to head out to get our airship back to really open up the endgame of Final Fantasy V. With our first, and maybe last tablet, depending on how I feel, I head to the Sealed Temple for loot. 1 tablet means 3 of the ultimate weapons. I can immediately disregard the Flame Lash, the Sage Staff, the Holy Lance, the Sasuke Knife, the Masamune, the Apollo's Harp, the Earth Bell, and the Rune Axe, because we just can't use them. Our Mystic Knight could use a new sword, so maybe the Excalibur is a Knight Sword and they can't use it. That's another one that's just completely useless to us. See ya. The Yoichi's bow is super good, and likely the best weapon I'll get for our Hunter, so that's 1 of 3 down. The Assassin's Dagger is great for the Mystic Knight or Dancer, so yeah, sure, we'll take the Assassin's Dagger. The Magus Rod is really good for our Black Mage, as we won't have to cycle through Elemental Rods. It acts as a buff to all 3 elements. It's pretty nice. And with that, we've got everything we can actually use from the Sealed Temple. So that's cool, I guess. First steps, as usual in the new world, are to pick up the Magic Lamp from Isri Falls by running around the top on Boko. That's a free set of summon spells, and it'll be super useful on the final boss specifically. Then, since we have a Dancer, a pit stop to Ruger to get another ribbon. That's 2 and likely all I'll be able to use. Dancer gets 1 of them, and Black Mage will get Equip Ribbon since there's no other synergies. Ribbons are actually amazing, so I guess I shouldn't complain too much. I did also roll Black Mage, so there's that. Then finally a trip down south to the Mirage Village. Lots of goodies in here. I grabbed the Thief Knife for steal potential. I might use it, depending on difficulties. I chose not to do the round-the-world trip on Boko, but I didn't feel like I needed to. The Mirage Vest is good, but it's not end-all be-all. Free the Black Chocobo for no reason other than it's an easy way to get out of the Mirage Village. Now, I made an attempt to go to the Fork Tower at this point, but I always forget this fun little tidbit. It's like clockwork. You have to do the tablet quest in order. It really feels like you should be able to do the tablets in whatever order you choose, which sucks because you're given almost all your travel tools immediately, and you're gated off arbitrarily. Dejected, I head to the big bridge to get that second tablet, because the game makes me. All I wanted to do was go to the fork tower, man. I'm not crying. Not crying. Nothing good in here for me at all. Just zip to the end of the shrine to start the boss fight. Stoker's kind of interesting. It's basically the boss equivalent of the shell game, where you have to guess which body is the real one and he'll shuffle around after every hit. If you're smart and you try to circumvent this with cast all magic, for instance, he'll counter with Blaze, an ice elemental attack. The fun thing about flame rings is we're immune to Blaze, and then Ferris has an ice shield, so she just heals off of it. Stoker is actually vulnerable to sleep, so you can sleep the forms to not get the counter blazes. Of course, we're immune to Blaze, so it doesn't really matter. All it does is waste time playing the animation. Could have gotten running shoes here to be immune to Mind Blast, but I didn't want to grind the cash. They're 50,000 each, it's expensive. And if I did use running shoes, then I'd be vulnerable to Blaze counters. Fire 3 all cast takes a long time, but it's totally safe. It's a boring fight, and I didn't really want to bother with it. The tablet is ours, so I can go collect a lot of useless weapons, or just head over to the Fork Tower and try my luck. The Fork Tower was about as big an issue as you'd expect with our party set up. Black Mage and Dancer go left, up the Magic Tower, and Mystic Knight and Hunter go right, up the Melee Tower. Run in from every battle is the go-to strategy. There's not really anything interesting here for us anyways. Minotaur is first up on the Melee side. Since magic is completely useless on this side, Flame Rings are useless. Elf Capes are going to be the go-to, as Minotaur only ever physically attacks. I equipped Kara with an Elf Cape and a Guardian Knife and put her in the back row. She's the dedicated healer for this fight with high potions. Ferris stayed in front with the Assassin's Dagger and X-Fight. The Assassin's Dagger is still significantly stronger than the Chicken Knife, despite my cowardice. The damage output here sucks, but it's super safe. Lots of deflections from shields, elf capes, and the Guardian Knife here, which is actually really nice. It's a rather lengthy battle, but we emerge victorious, to no one's shock. Then the second squad has to immediately fight Omniscient. I have nightmares about Omniscient from some previous Fiestas. I remember very clearly an extremely lengthy and arduous battle with Omniscient, only to get killed by the final attack Flare, and I had to redo the whole thing. I don't enjoy this fight at all, but it's not overly complicated. 2 characters with ribbons means no need to worry about getting silenced, so we're fine. I used a couple of elixirs because of Omniscient's crazy high HP pool, but it goes fine. Unga bunga. Me cast Fire 3. After this, Flare and Holy are at our disposal. Flare is actually stronger on our non-black mages because they can't boost elemental power. It does cost more MP though. Fire 3 is still our strongest spell because it's boosted with the Magus Rod on our Black Mage. The Mystic Knight can now use Holy and Flare Sword, which can be pretty strong. At this point, I'm basically just rearing to go to the end zone. I made a quick pit stop at History Falls because there's an Enhancer Sword in here. I didn't like what I saw there, so I left. I didn't really need the Enhancer anyway. It's time we just moved on. The end zone, the interdimensional rift, whatever you want to call it, it's pretty basic. Mostly just running from battle to battle through various scenery. You start in a desert, then you go into a mechanical area, then a forest, followed by caves and a castle, then the void itself. There's some decent stuff for us to find in here. There's a third ribbon, or fourth if you got the one in Karnak. Clearly not still bitter about that one, as well as an Enhancer Sword, which we didn't get in history, which goes on the Mystic Knight, since the Chicken Knife still isn't quite up to scratch, and it just may never be, and it has more attack power than the Assassin's Dagger. The first boss in here is a total pushover, just wasted with tier 3 black magic. I was really excited for Ferris to showcase Flare Sword X-Fight, but she got nailed with Old, which crippled her damage output. Big surprise, Fire 3 wins out again. Otherwise, the fight's barely an issue. She relies on status ailments and self-buffs and doesn't attack all that much. It's a complete walkover. After that, we just mosey down to the caves. There's some good stuff in here too, including a Coral Ring and Angel Ring, both valued at 50,000 gil. Not a bad find, but we're never going to use them. Omega wanders around down here, and I actually almost killed it a few times, but I opted not to bother doing too many attempts. A lot of it comes down to luck with our setup and not having someone get circled out of the fight, and very few, if any, surge beams. If we got good luck, we could probably have beaten it without grinding. We didn't, so I just moved on. Moving on, a panda whose Byblos' older brother is next, and he's a joke at this stage of the game. Books burn, in case you hadn't noticed, so yippee, more Fire 3. Fun fact, if you have a summoner, Ifrit will stun a panda for like 2 or 3 turns. It's busted as hell. Again, another unworthy opponent for our black magic setup. Not much to say about this next area, it's mostly a transition to the castle, then we jump down into the dungeon and face off against Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a blue mage, but other than that, he's nothing special. He's weak to bio, so Venom Rod and spamming bio with everyone wins out. An occasional Fire 3 if we need to heal, to no one's surprise. Beating Apocalypse unlocks a save point, and I always take this, because this next fight can be a doozy. We've done fine up to this point, but Catastrophe is where we hit the first real problem. Without readily available access to Float, we have some major issues moving forward. Now I could have gotten Float. I could have hunted down an enemy capable of using Float, then used the Dancer's Flirt to charm it and make it cast it on my party. Then I equip a Wall Ring to break its AI, but I didn't want to leave the end zone just to do all that. It would have been pretty tedious. I gave it a few attempts, but my party just couldn't survive an Earthshaker. So option 2 is just grinding a few levels in here to get our party's HP to a point where they can survive an Earthshaker. I went from level 32 to 35, using the save point from Apocalypse to use tents and cabins I had stockpiled. After that short grind, it's time for a rematch, and our ragtag bunch of heroes managed to barely survive an Earthshaker. Hey, if you can survive one Earthshaker, you can cast Fire 3 to heal, and then you can survive the next one. Since everyone has black magic, whoever the lucky one is that gets a turn after Earthshaker, just Fire 3's our party. Everyone else attacks, and eventually, we reign supreme. Get ourselves a nice little smooch for our efforts, but it's time to move on. We got bigger fish to fry. All this Unga Bunga Fire 3ing has caused my head to cave in, apparently, because I bungled the HE double hockey sticks out of this one. I know that Halicanos opens by toading your whole party, so I smartly pre-toaded them. That's just big brain moves, man. Now, the hilarious thing about this is that my Dancer and Black Mage were wearing ribbons, which make you immune to Toad. If you pre-toad and enter a battle with a ribbon on, you're just stuck as a Toad? Ferris died early on while wearing the bone mail, because I'm an idiot, so I can't revive her. I'm stuck with 2 Toads and a Hunter who has X-Fight. This was a lot of bungling Phoenix Downs on Toads and throwing high potions, and praying I can wear Halicanos down with X-Fight. Eventually I did win out, but I made that fight way harder than it needed to be. Way harder. I guess a little bit of intensity was good because spamming Fire 3 was getting a little dull. After Halicanos, I always take a detour back to Apocalypse to save my game and refresh my party, mostly because I don't always have a reliable way to kill Twintania. But that's not true this time. Twintania can counter attacks with Tidal Wave, which obviously sucks. I'm wearing Fire Rings and I take double damage from water attacks, so I'm not even going to bother attacking. Twintania has a set attack pattern and will eventually start casting Giga Flare, which leaves him vulnerable to instant death. You'll learn this in a little book. I prime my Mystic Knight with Break Blade and Weather the Storm with Fire 3s. Once Giga Flare starts charging, a single swing, and the fight's over. Easy game, easy life. Now we head into the Void. The Void is the best place to get AP in the game. Every battle yields double-digit AP and tons of gil. Unfortunately, no experience. I've mastered everything at this point, or at least as much as I care to. Running from every battle? Sounds appropriate. A battle with Gilgamesh here isn't a big deal, just kill him as normal. You can steal a Genji shield here by using the Thief Knife. I didn't bother. I should have bothered. Just keep heading up until you find a fun glowing light on the left side. I wiped on Necrophobe the first time, because my Mystic Knight got railed with Holy, and it killed her. I forgot to take the Bone Mail off. Again. And guess what? That means I can't revive her. Now I have no reliable way to damage the barriers. So it's over. Just gotta mosey on back there and do attempt number 2, no big deal. This time sans Bone Mail, in case Ferris dies again. Now the barriers have Reflect, but they are vulnerable to instant death and Petrify. This fight is where Break Blade and X-Fight really shine. Weather the initial storm of attacks by countering ourselves with Fire 3, buff my Mystic Knight with Break, and then unleash an X-Fight. If you're really lucky, you'll hit every barrier in one turn. Unfortunately, this time I only got 2, but that still cripples the damage output. From here on out, I opted to just individually kill them with attack rather than risking randomized X-Fight targets. Once all the barriers are down, Necrophobe usually just attacks us physically. Ferris changes from Break to Fire 3 Blade because Necrophobe is weak to all elements. Even with Fire 3 X-Fight, Mystic Knight is still underperforming compared to even a Hunter or Dancer's Fire 3. It's a shame, really. Black magic is just too strong. Gilgamesh shows up and I should have attempted to steal his Genji armor. I really should have. But I forgot I had a thief knife. Whoops. Definitely not going to regret that in a few minutes. Reaching the end of the end zone, I had nothing left. I was out of high potions. I had maybe 4 Phoenix Downs and no elixirs or others. I was completely drained of everything. I had like 3 tents left. I made some valiant attempts on Neo X Death. I set my party up to be totally immune to White Hole and got to Neo X Death with no problems. I petrified the Alchemist part with my Mystic Knight. I used the Magic Lamp to one-hit KO the caster with Odin. Things were looking really good. My party could just not survive the onslaught of vacuum waves. Then Grand Cross's zombification and Confuse crippled what was left. I gave it a valiant shot, but shamefully, I left the end zone in tatters and barely made it out alive. I took a detour to the Phoenix Tower here. I used the Thief Knife from the Mirage Village to use Mug to get myself 2 Prism Dresses from Belladonna. Equip Ribbons from Dancer actually allows you to use all of the Dancer equipment, which includes these. Prism Dresses are very good body gear and they make you immune to Confuse. That's one of the problem areas for Neo X Death's Grand Cross solved for at least 2 party members. The other is just levels. I leveled from 35 to 42, which seems a bit excessive in the desert outside of the Phoenix Tower. I swear this happens every year. I get to X-Death without or with only minor issues, and then I just can't stand up to the attacks of Neo X-Death. Whether it's Almagust one-shotting me, or getting ruined by Grand Cross, or even just not being able to tank vacuum waves. Grinding levels provides a lot of HP, and enough gil to buy ourselves some items, like a pair of running shoes, and as many Phoenix Downs as we can throw in a lifetime. Even a couple of 50,000 gil elixirs. Fully restocked, I make the trek back to the bottom of the void, take my save from Necrophobe, and try to forget the last 2 hours. My final party setup was as follows. Everyone was level 42. Butts was a Mystic Knight with black, obviously, wielding an Enhancer, a Flame Shield, a Crystal Helmet, the Bone Mail, and a pair of running shoes. Lena was a Black Mage with Equip Ribbons. She's using the Magus Rod, wearing a ribbon, a Prism Dress, and a Flame Ring. Kara is a Ranger with black. She's using a Yoichi Bow, wearing a Tiger Mask, Stealth, and Flame Ring. Ferris was my Dancer with black, to no one's surprise. She's wielding an Assassin's Dagger, a ribbon, Prism Dress, and a Flame Ring. The rematch for X-Death goes as you'd expect after a couple hours of grinding. Kara isn't status immune, but that's the price I opted to pay to have 3 out of 4 mostly immune to Grand Cross's worst ailments. Thankfully, she never ate a white hole, so that's groovy. Everyone has black because at the end of the day, black is just more reliable than X-Fight. You can whiff entire rounds of attacks hitting parts of X-Death that are already dead, which really sucks. The versatility of being able to heal and do reasonable damage to all remaining parts of X-Death is just too strong. If you ever leave one part alive, he goes into berserk mode and starts throwing meteors and comets at you, which is a great way to wipe your party out. Honestly, in retrospect, I should have just put Guardian Knives on my Hunter and Dancer to help eat some vacuum waves and other physicals. They're not physically attacking anyways, so the Yoichi Bow and Assassin's Dagger are mostly useless. I may have been able to pull through without grinding if I had those. Again, every year you learn something, and hindsight's 2020. Spamming Fire 3 on X-Death and ourselves leads us to Phase 2, Neo X-Death, the big boy. The battle starts off with 2 things. The Mystic Knight is going to use Break Blade on the part that uses Almagust, which eliminates a potential party wiping attack. The rest of the characters are going to use the Magic Lamp until Odin comes out, which kills the main caster part of Neo X-Death. Now we only have to deal with the big beefy boy in the front and the part that uses Grand Cross. Most of the party is immune to various status effects, so Grand Cross can potentially whiff, which is great. The party isn't totally immune, so some things like zombification may land. I actually have some items now, so I can throw Revivifies and Phoenix Downs, and I had like 4 elixirs picked up in the end zone on the way back. After the initial hectic run of eliminating the most dangerous parts, I stabilize. If a party member ends up dying from Vacuum Wave, I can revive them with a Phoenix Down, my patented strategy, coined while attempting to steal Gafgarian's Blood Sword in my Final Fantasy Tactics livestream. If they die in one hit, then I shouldn't even bother healing them. I'll just throw another Phoenix Down next time when they die. All casting Fire 3 hurts the damage output, but it helps to ensure that both remaining parts of Neo Exdeath die near the same time. Doing it this way is definitely slower, but way more safe. I accidentally did a few single target attacks because I was tired, it was getting a little late, and as a result, Medio almost wiped my party. Thankfully, everyone except Kara survived, and I got my final attack off to kill Neo Exdeath for good. Another year, another Fiesta in the bank. This year's Fiesta was pretty good, and basically the same as last year's, although I didn't get a chemist, but I did do a little bit of extra content. Having a more diverse party with access to both magic and decent physicals is an insane boon, and a nice change compared to last year's almost entirely magic-heavy composition. Granted, I didn't get the best physical jobs, but that's fine. It's part of the Fiesta. Black Mage is just insanely overpowered in Final Fantasy V. If you really get any of the mages at the Wind Crystal, you're golden. Stay golden, pony boy. Although White Mage does have a pretty tough go of it early on, you just don't have the damage output to deal with anything. It was kind of cool to use Black Magic as some outside-the-box healing with the Flame Rings, which did alleviate a lot of the stress in dungeons. I didn't actually do that last year. Not having adequate in-combat healing really sucks. I did have to grind 200,000 gil for that privilege, though. Mystic Knight is fun. It's always been one of my favorites. You've got a decent variety of physical and magical attacks to help make it kind of versatile. It's a decent frontliner with access to shields, which helps during a lot of encounters. The flame shield specifically was something I totally underutilized. It would have let me free up an accessory slot, which I ended up doing at the end of the game. It's fun and useful for most of the game, although it's not nearly as exploitable as others, besides a few very specific encounters like Twintania and Neo Exdeath. I didn't really need to use Spellblade a lot, which kinda sucks. If you're foregoing use of a Black Mage, or you have access to dual-wield Spellblade X-Fight on a Freelancer, it's pretty insane. With Black Mage, it only really has 2 or 3 standout moments. Hunter's okay, you know, It's mostly defined as the job that gives you access to X-Fight. Bows kinda suck as weapons from my experience with this playthrough, but you can just give them X-Fight to make them kinda decent damage dealers regardless. And they get to stay in the back row, which is good. Unfortunately, it's almost entirely outclassed by Black Magic in this Fiesta. The versatility offered with full party healing and comparable, sometimes better damage output just outclasses Hunter's Yoichi bow. Dancer sucks, and I'll always hate it. I'll take literally anything over it. Everyone says it's better than people give it credit for, but when you're rolling an Earth job, it's just boring. It doesn't have cool job-specific side quests like Bard or Summoner. It's just kind of a crappy melee attacker that relies on dice rolls to deal damage. It's a one-trick gimmick job, and I genuinely loathe using it. The only saving grace is equip ribbons. Being able to wear a prism dress to make you immune to confuse, and a ribbon to make you immune to instant death, petrify, toad, poison, darkness, old, berserk, and silence is absolutely busted. Very valuable on Neo Exdeath specifically to beat out his Grand Cross attacks. That's kind of about it, outside of like Dragon Pod and a few others. I would have been able to deal with Grand Cross just as easy with any of the other Earth Crystal jobs. It's just a matter of giving everyone Black Magic if you roll it. Once you roll Black Mage, everyone from then on is just a Black Mage, wearing a slightly different coat of paint. I've done the Fiesta for 5 years now. It might be my time to retire from it. I like it as a challenge usually, but a lot of the time it seems like one of two things happen. If you got a top tier job, you're just exploiting the same things over and over from that single job, and kind of letting the other ones fall to the wayside except in a few specific moments. And that was this year and last year's with Black Mage. Alternatively, if you get some kind of crappy setups that really struggle with certain encounters, those are usually just kind of frustrating. The only real way to hedge your bets is to grind levels to help alleviate your suboptimal party, when in a normal game you just swap your jobs to something else and crush it easily. I talked about an all Berserker party last year, and I still might attempt it at some point and graph out my progress, do the timelines, and see how many attempts it takes on certain fights. It would definitely be more of an ongoing thing though, don't expect it anytime soon. I think moving forward I'll curate my own compositions for playthroughs instead of doing another 4-job Fiesta. I'll likely continue to play Final Fantasy V once a year or so because it's my favorite Final Fantasy on the Super Nintendo, but it'll probably be on my own terms from now on.